Hey everybody, this is Greg Swanson, and today I want to talk about Saul's disobedient sacrifice and the marriage covenant, and how these two things are very closely linked. The Bible study for the lesson is 1 Samuel chapter 13, and I want to start in verse 3. So here Jonathan attacks the Philistine outpost at Geba, and the Philistines heard about it. Then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." So all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost, and now Israel has become a stench to the Philistines. And the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth Aven. When the men of Israel saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves and thickets among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Okay, so situation is bad. They attack, and there's a counterattack from the Philistines, and then there's this spirit of fear that comes on the soldiers on Israel, and they end up hiding because they think they're going to get wiped out. Okay, so Saul, who's king, remains at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. Okay, the situation's not good. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal. This is interesting. And Saul's men, begin to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the burnt offering, Samuel arrives. And Saul went out to greet him. Okay, so now this is kind of awkward, right? Because it doesn't exactly talk about the agreement that Saul and Samuel have, but apparently there was a 7 day waiting period, and then Samuel was going to come. And Saul did wait. The text shows us that he waited. But there was something else in this agreement that it sounds like Samuel says to Saul, "Don't do anything until I get there. I'll be there in 7 days." And that's kind of what you can gather from the text. Um, but at the end of 7 days, Saul's men are scattering and the Philistines are encroaching. Things don't look good. So Saul takes matters into his own hands, and he has the burnt offering brought to him, and he makes the fellowship offering. Doesn't wait for Samuel. This is a big boo boo, okay? So then in this awkward moment, Samuel arrives. Let's see what happens. Um, so what have you done? Asked Samuel. Saul replies, "When I saw that the men were scattering and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." Okay, so this is all Saul's doing. He takes action. He believes he has to do something. He says, "What do I do now?" He looks at the situation. It's a disaster. Samuel's not there. And he doesn't maintain the agreement that he has with Samuel to wait for him, apparently no matter what, and look to him and the Lord. Instead, he says, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. It's me, it's on me. I have to do something. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer sacrifices. And because I can't wait anymore, I have to do something." Right? And so as I was reading this, I just felt the Spirit of the Lord say to me, "This is a picture of marriage." And I kind of stopped and I said, What do you mean, Lord?" The Lord just downloaded on me what he meant by this. Um, and in marriage, we as men come into a marriage covenant with our wives, right? And we are bound by that marriage covenant to be obedient to it. And our obedience to that marriage covenant allows us to enter into that covenant in fullness. Okay? And even though we're married to our wife, we have the potential as men to tiptoe around the outer edge of that covenant as opposed to fully entering in. And the Lord kind of showed me this all at the same time because He asked me, how and to what degree, Greg, have you entered into your marriage covenant? And I asked more. I said, what do you mean, Lord? And so, again, the Lord's just kind of talking to me gently in my heart. And He showed me that in certain times in my marriage, I have walked around the outer edge of the covenant. And this is like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm talking to Ivana, and I said to her something to the effect of, baby, do you believe that I'm putting you first? I asked her that. She kind of giggled at me, and she said, no, you put other things first. Your job is first. Mountain biking is first. The archery range is first. Reading, your books, movies. I mean, she had a kind of a laundry list of things that were in front of her. Okay? And in that moment, at least I had the wisdom to stop and let her words wash over me. Okay? And really eat the core of my intestines apart. Because no guy wants his wife to tell him that no, she's not first for him, and that she feels on page 4 or 5 or past his hobbies or down the list from the things that he wants to do with his evening after work or what have you. And so in that moment, I just let her words kind of chew out my insides, if you will, and they did. And to have her say those things to me was healthy for her and for me. Okay, and since then, I have had a number of discussions with other men, and I've asked them about their marriage, and one common refrain you will hear is what what a guy is doing for his wife, meaning things are going good, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, and then I'm doing that. Okay, you get kind of a laundry list of items that the guy is doing in the marriage. I'm taking care of this, I'm taking care of that, I'm taking care of these things that he's doing. Oftentimes we as guys believe that our contribution to the marriage covenant is our work in many respects. We're providing for that woman. We're taking care of her. We're bringing home the money so that she can have the furnishings and the things that she needs to live her life. That's a common refrain. And that's good and right and noble. But when it's the answer to, how's your marriage? It can kind of end up being a bit of a red flag, okay? Because if you talk to a guy who's giving you a laundry list of the things that he's doing for his wife, it might be, or you could hear in the background, the voice of Saul justifying to himself before Samuel what he did in this covenant contract. He had a contract, he had an agreement with Samuel that he would wait, and he didn't. When we enter into our marriage covenant with our wife, we enter into an agreement to be obedient to that thing. And part of that agreement is putting her first. Think of the vows: love, honor, obey, right? And when we ask her, baby, do you feel like I'm putting you first, right? Obviously, Saul did not put Samuel in that agreement first. He took action and did things and then listed those things. And so when you talk to a guy and he takes action by listing the things that he's doing for his wife, just take a moment and gently talk to that guy and say, hey, listen, what would your wife say if I asked her the question, do you feel like your husband is putting you first? And some women, no matter how well they're taken care of financially and otherwise by their husband, will explode in tears when directly asked that question. And if that's the case, and the two are together, and you're facilitating that, it's important that you let that conversation take its own course of action. And for those guys out there who are about to ask their wives that question, baby, do you feel like I put you first? Let her answer in the fullness of her emotions. And for God's sake, gentlemen, shut your mouth when she's talking and let her speak until she doesn't have anything else to say. And if she says anything short of, yes, he does put me first, and I do feel like that, for those guys that have a wife that answers that way, this object lesson is done. It's over. For those of us that don't, for those of us that have a wife that says no to that question, and then she has a long list of things that she needs to say because it's so much on her heart and she hasn't been able to say it up until that time, let her say that in its entirety. And the guy, let her words eat your intestines apart. Okay? And walk away and think about what she said. And a week later, ask her the same question. And continue to ask her that question until your behavior changes by hearing her heart, and her answer changes by you, through your own course of action and your heart turning towards her, have modified your behavior to the point where she feels now elevated in the relationship. And over the course of time, your wife will even say, you don't need to ask this question to me anymore because I do feel elevated by you. I do feel like I'm in first place. So, guys, don't make the mistake that I've made in my marriage by putting my hobbies and activities and other things in front of my wife, and then even mentally justified that I'm a good husband because I make the money, right? Careful of that justification, because that is some evidence that you and I have tiptoed on the outside of the covenant and just played with it, but failed to truly enter in by being obedient to it. Amen. Have a great day, everybody. I hope this was helpful.